The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And the first item on the agenda is request authorization for the approval of the minutes of December 13, 2018 meeting. A motion's in order?
So moved.
Second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 2, request authorization to grant tentative designation to Thompson Island Outward Bound Education Center, Inc. as redeveloper of Berth 10 and Watershed, and to enter into a license agreement for interim use and to enter into a lease agreement for the long-term use of Berth 10 and Watershed within the Raymond L. Flynn Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. I'm requesting that the board please give tentative designation status to Thompson Island Outward Bound Education Center Incorporated for the EDIC Berth 10 dock and adjacent watershed located in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park, and also vote to authorize the director to enter into a license agreement with them for interim use of the property. The leased premises consist of a section of dock, berthing area, security gate, and adjacent watershed of approximately 5,100 square feet, including a float and gangway. The BPDA issued an RFP for this property on August 23, 2018, which sought uses for Berth 10 that are consistent with Chapter 91 requirements, the Marine Parks Master Plan and 2017 update, and the Master Chapter 91 license. Because the berth is located in a designated port area, allowed uses must be maritime dependent or accessory uses. The RFP also required that proposals demonstrate the ability to promote access to Boston Harbor for City of Boston residents, particularly young people. On September 27, 2018, we received one response to the RFP from Thompson Island Outward Bound Education Center, a 501c3 nonprofit educational corporation and conservator of Thompson Island in the Boston Harbor Islands. Thompson Island Outward Bound currently operates a water ferry service from the leased premises to transport over 2,500 Boston area school students to Thompson Island through partnerships for educational programs that provide field science and nature experience to encourage character development and minimize achievement and opportunity gaps for these students. They also operate revenue-generating programs and activities on Thompson Island, including weddings, corporate events and functions, and team-building retreats. They propose to redevelop the leased premises with significant improvements to the existing ramp and float system that will allow expansion of their programming. Thompson Island Outward Bound will meet the asking price of $3,000 per month rent. The term of the lease will be 10 years, triple net, with escalation adjustments as appropriate. They expect to finance the proposed total term improvements of approximately $1.6 million to the leased premises through philanthropic means. They have a financial commitment from a recognized lender as well as an endowment that can be pledged as collateral. They have a strong track record of prolific fundraising and receiving philanthropic gifts. Staff recommends that the board grant tentative designation to Thompson Island Outward Bound Education Center, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Item number 3, request authorization to ratify and confirm a third amendment to the lease with New Palmer Street Limited Partnership for the use of 10,000 square feet of commercial space located at 7 Palmer Street in Roxbury. Bob.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, Secretary Pahumis. In 2007, a lease space was negotiated at 7 Palmer Street to help with some of the programs essential to the Roxbury community. This is the third amendment to that lease. It has a 5-year span with a 5-year option. In 2007, the lease rates averaged approximately $21.50 for that 5-year period. For this 10-year period, we're talking about an average lease cost of $24 a square foot, roughly a $2.50 increase for a 20-year span of the lease. The programs in Roxbury are essential. They include the youth options, unlimited Boston, or commonly referred to as YLU. They provide case management services to court-involved youth or gang-affiliated, prior gang-affiliated youth to help them become successful members of the community. Also, RFC E hosts one of the Boston Tax Help Coalition's busiest tax preparation sites and does a lot of financial literacy to improve people's lives in that area. So these are key components of some of the things that happen in the Office of Workforce Development and why that site is so necessary.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4, request authorization to enter into a 3-year contract with VistaShare, technology-related services for Boston Saves, the city's children's saving account program, and an amount not to exceed $170,000. Go Shi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members, and the Secretary. As you might know, Boston Saves is the city's children's savings program managed out of the Office of Workforce Development. The program is expanding citywide to all BPS schools with kindergarten classrooms in the fall of 2019. And following a procurement process, we have chosen a technology vendor, VistaShare. The vendor will provide Boston Saves families with reliable and easy to use software to help them track savings and help us further the mayor's goal of creating a college and career-oriented culture for Boston's kids. Thus, on behalf of OWD, I request the board's approval to select VistaShare as the vendor to support and expand the technology platform for Boston Saves. Thank you so much, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Goshi. Item number 5, personnel. Jeanette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. We have a few items for your consideration on the EDIC agenda. We have 4 appointments for your consideration. In the Development Review Department, starting January 21st, we have Aisling Kerr, Project Manager, and starting February 4th, we have Ebony DeRosa, Project Manager, and Edward Carmody, Project Assistant. In the Planning Division, Climate Change and Environmental Planning Department, we have Joseph Christo, starting as Senior Resilience and Waterfront Planner on February 4th. We have 1 employment service contractor with details listed in the board menu for your review. Jennifer Miniman in the Office of Financial Empowerment, OWD Division. And we have 3 departures. Michael Rooney, Senior Project Manager from Development Review, Michelle Mullum, Grants Manager from OWD, and Gina Physick, Assistant Director of Media Relations and Public Affairs from the Director's Office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And I need a motion to adjourn the EDIC meeting.
I move we adjourn the EDIC meeting.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And the first item is request authorization for the approval of the minutes of December 13, 2018 meeting. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next item is request authorization to schedule a public hearing on February 14th, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to consider the development plan for Planned Development Area Number 118, Rio Grande Dudley Square Development, 2343 through 2345 Washington Street, and 11 through 29 Roxbury Street in Roxbury. A motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 3, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on February 14th, 2019 at 5:40 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director for the development plan for Planned Development Area Number 120 at 144 Addison Street in East Boston. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 4, Board of Appeal. Are there any changes, Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Paul Hamus. 77 petitions have been prepared for transmittal to the board. There have been no changes since the original list.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm going to read item 5 and 6 together, and it's going to be presented together, and then we're going to have a separate vote on each item. So, item number 5, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for proposals for the consultant services for the East Boston Multimodal Transportation Plan. And item number 6, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for proposals for consultant services for Plan East Boston. Christina.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, members of the board, Madam Secretary. My name is Christina, and I'm a senior planner at the BPDA in the Department of Downtown and Neighborhood Planning. I'm here today with my colleague, Nick Schmidt. And we're here to request authorization for the Secretary to advertise and issue 2 separate requests for proposals to engage in consultant services to assist in the preparation of Plan East Boston. My colleague Nick will first provide an overview of the multimodal transportation RFP, which is item 5 on your agenda, and I will conclude with a summary of the land use, urban design, and market analysis RFP, which is item 6. By way of some very brief background, Plan East Boston is a neighborhood-wide comprehensive planning initiative which will produce a framework to predictably shape the future of the neighborhood and identify opportunities to preserve, enhance, and grow. Mayor Walsh announced the planning initiative in June of 2018, and in September we hosted our first public meeting. This process will update the East Boston Master Plan published in the year 2000, produce recommendations for updating Article 53 of the Boston Zoning Code published in 1993, produce urban design guidelines, and produce recommend near, medium, and long-term implementation projects for the neighborhood's multimodal transportation network. We are seeking consultant services to support these efforts through 2 separate but coordinated RFPs, land use, urban design, and market analysis, as well as multimodal transportation. Though under separate consultant contracts, we will ensure a high degree of collaboration between the consultant teams. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Nick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, members of the board, Madam Secretary. My name is Nick Schmidt. I'm a new senior transportation planner at the BPDA's Transportation and Infrastructure Planning Department. I am before you to request authorization for the Secretary to advertise and issue a request for proposals to engage a consultant to assist in the preparation of the Plan East Boston Multimodal Transportation Study. As mentioned, the Multimodal Transportation Study is one of 2 complementary RFPs that together will help produce Plan East Boston. This map may look familiar, as it was presented at the board meeting in October to describe the extent planned for an interim planning overlay district in East Boston. The extent of the iPod was approved in support of long-range planning efforts in the neighborhood. The extent of both the land use, urban design, and market analysis study and the multimodal transportation study will use the same boundary. Though the boundary excludes both Suffolk Downs and Massport property, planning efforts will consider and incorporate the expected impacts of both projects as well as regional infrastructure. Both the land use, urban design, and market analysis study and the multimodal transportation study will take up to 24 months. They will contribute to major deliverables at 6-month intervals, including an existing conditions summary report at 6 months, a neighborhood vision summary report at 12 months, and draft and final project and policy recommendations at 18 and 24 months, respectively, as part of the neighborhood plan. A robust community process has begun for Plan East Boston and will continue through plan completion, including transportation-specific meetings. Consultant services and expertise will be needed to support BPDA in the analysis of East Boston's walking, biking, transit, and street networks. The BPDA will work with the community and selected consultants to identify analysis areas within East Boston to focus efforts on locations experiencing transportation challenges today and where future growth is anticipated. While separate RFPs, Christina and I will coordinate extensively between scopes, for example, analyzing land use scenarios and then testing scenarios for impacts to the multimodal transportation networks. Estimating these impacts will inform the development, refinement, and prioritization of recommended policies, strategies, and network improvements to be implemented over time. As with other recent neighborhood transportation planning projects, a portion of the multimodal transportation scope will be reserved for conceptual design services for quick build projects to be implemented during study development. I hand it back to Christina.
Great, thanks, Nick. So second verse, same as the previous. Both the study boundary and the timeline for the land use, urban design, and market analysis scope are the same as they are for the multimodal. I'm just going to briefly describe the scope related to land use, urban design, and market analysis. The BPDA expects that this professional will operate as the primary consultant for the study and that the market analysis component will operate as a sub-consultant under the resulting contract. The selected consultant will help create massing options and development scenarios for 4 to 6 sub-areas within the East Boston neighborhood. The study calls for the selected consultant to work closely with BPDA staff to generate massing and land use scenarios, the impacts of which will be evaluated quantitatively and qualitatively. These options will then be used for discussion in community workshops and ultimately to create recommendations, urban design guidelines, and inform new zoning for future developments in East Boston. We expect to return to you in early spring for authorization to enter into contracts with the most qualified consultant resultant from both of these RFP processes. This concludes our presentation, and at this point we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. I'm always curious about our timing as an agency for these big plans, because there's already been so much development in East Boston. Can somebody talk about why this plan didn't happen earlier, or why it was initiated this summer, and just about the overall timing in terms of the development in the neighborhood?
Sure. I mean, I can't speak to why perhaps it wasn't initiated sooner, although certainly very necessary now. And in June of 2018, Mayor Walsh announced Plan East Boston together with 4 other planning initiatives. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Sarah Meyerson, the Director of Planning. So I think everywhere where we're looking to do these plans, it's a delicate balance, and we wanted to make sure we got through the comprehensive citywide planning effort as well before we dove into the additional district plans. That helped to identify key focus areas with, there is just a capacity in terms of how many different areas we can be planning at once around the city, and so where were our next priority areas, and that's really looking at a triangulation of how effective is the existing zoning and how effectively is it working, and what are the development pressures, and then where do we see opportunity areas as well. In East Boston, what we really saw was kind of a perfect set of all of those conditions that we would look for in an area to do planning. So as we did analysis here, looking through how effective was the existing zoning, nearly every proposal we were seeing was asking for a variance, which indicated to us that there were perhaps zoning changes that needed to be contemplated. On top of that, there were areas where we felt like there could be, consistent with the Imagine Boston framework, neighborhood preservation, neighborhood enhancement, particularly in commercial corridors and some of these areas that will be identified in the planning, and then more of the concentrated areas for potential neighborhood expansion, where you have the Suffolk Downs process already ongoing. Why, I think that we could always ask why plans didn't start sooner, but I think what we really saw here was the robust analysis as to why we should plan now, and how we can do a comprehensive neighborhood plan that's informed by all of the values laid out in Imagine Boston 2030. So on top of that, I think that it's also important to remember here, we also put an iPod in place at the beginning of this planning process, indicating that we were taking a heightened awareness, and there would be additional community process as we went through the planning itself, in large part informed by the fact that we saw that the existing zoning was not effectively dictating what was being proposed.
Great. And looking around the city, like over the next 5 years, where would you anticipate this kind of process being initiated by the city? Is that something you can answer now?
So I think that what you really can look to is Imagine Boston 2030, and where you I don't have the maps before me right now, but what it would indicate are areas that we've identified potentially specifically for those expanded neighborhood opportunities. That's where you're likely to see a focus of some of the planning. And what you have there are not just the concentrated areas. There are 5 concentrated areas that I identified, but there's also what we often identified as the breadcrumbs. Those would be the areas between neighborhoods where you see underutilization of parcels and a breakdown in neighborhood fabric. And those are often where we're seeing heightened pressures and need for planning, where the existing zoning is inconsistent with where the future evolution of that land may be. Those areas tend to have been following, for example, along the Dorchester Avenue corridor. so where we've been planning. We have a robust amount of planning going on right now, and that planning will proceed forward over the next 24, 36 months. And so we have neighborhood plans that are also commencing with Plan Mattapan. Plan Newmarket will be coming out this year. Plan the downtown planning study, as well as Plan East Boston. And I think that body of work is really the body of work we'll be focused on for the comprehensive neighborhood planning. There will inevitably be other areas that we identify along the way as well. So, and I think big picture, the roadmap is Imagine Boston 2030, and it identifies some of those opportunity areas where there's a need for the planning, and also where there's a need to really think about that framework of preserve, enhance, and grow, and where things aren't working.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
I have just more of a request or a comment. I understand that this is just a request so that you can put out an RFP, and that there are many different things that you're considering when you're evaluating these consultants. I would just ask that you consider the level of cultural competency of each consultant and consultant team, and ability to be able to interact with the residents of East Boston in multiple languages, and also kind of as they're starting to plan the different meetings and everything that kind of goes with this, that the consultant has that skill set, and that is something I think should be valued.
It's an important point, and I would just add that the lead role in terms of the community engagement will continue to be our team here, and the team that we've assembled to work in the community, and then it will be informed and supported by the work of the consultants, but we will be taking the lead on the community engagement component.
Would that include, would that also include some training for community people so that they can become more engaged in actually doing some of this work themselves?
We're working right now to look through with the community engagement team that we've been building some different strategies, and some of that can be capacity building that we could be doing in the neighborhoods to help them in terms of being ambassadors for the plans themselves, and help us also in building up the capacity from the planning language, the development language, and helping to build up that literacy in the community, so people understand when people are coming into meetings, they feel like they are evaluating proposals and thinking about the future of their neighborhood from a position of strength. And so those are all things that we're working through right now. And then also looking into the possibility in the near term of maybe working through some meeting design strategies and some other things we can do to continually enhance our community engagement process.
And how would this work interface with the new resiliency plan?
So we also we will be having additional work, in the RFP speak to this, related to the ongoing resiliency work in East Boston. And that will be really moving forward the district plan that's already been done there, but then also looking at a future MHP, municipal harbor plan in East Boston that would be reflecting the needs for change as it relates to resiliency. So that will be coordinated with this, but would be, again, a closely coordinated but separate planning effort, given that there's a discrete set of a skill set that we would want to be bringing on from a consultant standpoint. So to come, bringing on that consultant as well, but they'll be closely coordinated, and that will be a part of the overall comprehensive plan East Boston. And we have, I believe it's our next community meeting, we'll be discussing, open space, resiliency, and the environment are topics that will be discussed at the next Plan East Boston meeting, which is just really a primer for all that's to come.
And did you refer to some of the smaller pieces of this work as breadcrumbs?
I referred to, when you look at the map of the city, the way that we mapped out the expanded neighborhood opportunity areas, which were identified as areas where there was kind of the breakdown between neighborhoods. It looks like breadcrumbs on the map of the city of Boston. So that's how, when you look at the map of Boston, it's what it looks like as we mapped it.
Yeah, because some of those interfaces between neighborhoods, seems to me, are part of how communities identify themselves.
They are how the communities identify themselves there, but I think we as a city can do a better job bringing those communities, bringing the neighborhoods together, so there feels like there's less of a fissure or a breakdown and more of a cohesive urban fabric that helps to create opportunities for neighborhoods to come together as well.
Sarah, do we have anyone Spanish speaking on our internal team for the East Boston plan?
Yes, we do.
She's Rosa, and she's fluent Spanish speaker.
We also provide translation services at the meetings, and we also translate materials into multiple languages.
We have several members of our AG, our advisory group, are also fluent Spanish speakers.
I think there's a full recognition internally of the importance for there to be a translation and importance of multiple languages being fully supported throughout the planning process in East Boston. So we will be doing that, as we have done in other planning processes as well.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'll take the first vote on item number 5. A motion's in order.
So moved.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And the second vote is on item number 6. A motion's in order.
So moved.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 7. Request authorization to advertise and issue an invitation for bids for the electrical repair and maintenance for BRA-owned properties for 1 year with a 2-year option and an amount not to exceed $50,000 annually. Richard?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Polhamus, can't really add much more to that. We're requesting authorization to issue an RFP for electrical services.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Hearing none. A motion's in order.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Richard. Item number 8, request authorization to amend the ground lease with CVPA Chain Forge LLC, redeveloper of the Chain Forge building located on a portion of Parcel NY-1 in the historic monument area of the Charlestown Navy Yard within the Charlestown Urban Renewal area. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In December of 2017, BPDA and CVPA Chain Forge LLC executed a ground lease for development of the Chain Forge building in the Charlestown Navy Yard into a 230-room hotel. Under the terms and conditions of the lease, the tenant/developer would be in default of the lease in the event that they did not obtain both building permits and financing by a date certain. In October of 2018, the board authorized an extension of time to complete financing and obtain building permits to January 31st of 2019. Collectively, we are in the final stages of BPDA approval of development and site plans, and the developer is ready and willing to file for building permits at ISD. We met as recently as last week with the development team to go over their financing, and they shared some written documentation with us of their negotiations with the equity providers and conventional financing for construction, and that is well in order. Not unlike the rope walk project that we talked about at the last board meeting, a very small wrinkle has developed since October where the National Park Service has alerted both BPDA and the developer to federal regulations that require language in the lease pertaining to the definition and calculation, and forgive my air quotes, of excess profit, which the developer would be required to invest into the Charlestown Navy Yard preservation, which they are more than willing to do. BPDA, National Park Service, and the developer have been working together diligently to develop appropriate language, and based on in the calculation, and based on our experience with the rope walk, we believe we have the language that is acceptable to the National Park Service. However, with the federal government shutdown, we're unable to get formal approval from NPS for the proposed language. And the developer will not be able to close on the equity participation or construction and loan financing until the excess profit language is formally inserted into the lease. So we're requesting permission to amend the lease to extend the deadline for both final financing and final building permits, and to further amend the lease to reflect the excess profit language that is required by the federal government.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions from the board?
Would this extension have been required if the federal government lockout weren't taking place?
Probably not. I think we were close enough that we could have wrapped it up. It would have been close, to be honest with you, but we're erring on the side of asking for a 90-day extension, so we're not back here next month.
Shutdown has had an impact on this.
Yes.
Okay, are there any further questions? Hearing none, a motion's in order. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Item number 9. Request authorization to extend the tentative designation of Urbanica as the redevelop of 90 Antwerp Street in Brighton. Gerald.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You'll remember that last year you approved the Article 80 application from Urbanica for their 90 Antwerp project and extended tentative designation through January 31st. I thought that would be enough for them to reach final designation. It almost was, but not quite. They had a successful outcome at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and just this week they presented their project to the Neighborhood Housing Trust. It was well received. I am hopeful and confident that there will be a positive outcome, and that's a key piece of their financing. So, but end of January is probably not enough time for them to wrap all that up. So I'm asking for an extension of the tentative designation, a generous 6 months. I don't think we'll need that much time. I expect to be back before you long before that is over to request final designation.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10, request authorization to extend the tentative designation of P-3 Partners LLC as the redeveloper of a portion of Parcel P3 on a portion of Parcel P3H in the Campus High School Urban Renewal Area. Dana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Secretary Paul Hemus. Here before you this afternoon to request an extension to the tentative designation of P3 Partners. As you are aware from previous presentations, we have articulated a number of considerations and requirements for the development team to complete in order to be considered for further extensions. It is the opinion of staff at this point in time that the proposed extension is in fact appropriate in light of a couple requirements or milestones that the development team has reached, which seem appropriate, none the least of which is the receipt of approval from Boston Water and Sewer Commission relative to the proposed relocation of the sewer line, in addition to the beginning working preparation for the materials for a Public Improvements Commission review, and also the completion of an appropriate draft of a memorandum of agreement between the development team and the Boston Public Schools for the portion of land that will be shared by the two entities relative to this proposed project. Similarly, the development team has worked to name and secure the participation of Landmark Properties as a development partner for finance purposes. And as part of that process, the development team has begun significant preparations of a joint venture agreement with Landmark Properties. Staff have reviewed an initial draft, or more than an initial draft, of that document and believe that in its current iteration, there's still more work to be done, but in its current iteration, the agreement does meet the needs that we as a landowner have relative to our interests. So that in and of itself is an indication of our confidence. Further, I wanted to articulate some of what we anticipate seeing as next steps for our review as staff and also for the development team to work on. We're requesting a specific amount of time, but anticipate being back before you before that tentative designation end to look at a couple of things, none the least of which is with the approval by Boston Water and Sewer, is an important milestone for us to take into consideration the overall site plan, which informs the planned development area which was originally submitted by the development team. In these intervening weeks, staff will be working with the development team to review a proposed amendment to that PDA, which we will then come back to you more than likely next month for a request to then petition the Boston Zoning Commission to approve that amended plan. We'll also be working, as we have been in the past, but very closely with the Roxbury Strategic Master Plan Oversight Committee that has also expressed concern and desire to see this move forward appropriately. We have a meeting scheduled with that group on January 31st as a follow-up to the larger public meeting that we held at the beginning of this month. In addition to the anticipated review with Boston Zoning Commission, we also anticipate the final designation, or I should say execution, of the joint venture agreement between Landmarks and P3 Partners, and that is, as stated earlier, a requirement of our consideration of moving forward. I'll stop there with my remarks, and anticipated that if you have any questions, myself, I'm available, but also members of the development team are here as well.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Are there any questions from the board?
I think there's a general understanding that the board and the agency are very supportive of seeing the museum project come to fruition. And we've granted a number of extensions. I made a point of attending the Roxbury Oversight meeting a couple of weeks ago just to get a sense of what the community is now saying about this development. And even as some challenging questions were raised, it's clear the community supports this project as well. I have one lingering question, and it relates, without getting into the detail, to my understanding that the project, as currently structured financially, is dependent on the presence of a big box retailer on the site. And in taking a look at what is going on in the retail industry these days, and the fact that we rarely, if ever, see a big box retailer come before this board as a fundamental part of the financing of a project, I wonder whether the development team has continued to explore other options that would, among other things, take advantage of new private financing that has become available or will become available as soon as the government reopens. I want to be sure that when this comes back before us, there are assurances of the financial viability of this project in a way that would not make it dependent on counter trends within the retail industry.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Jeff Feldman from the development team to take a shot at that, or Ms. Barry Feldman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Secretary Palemis, in answer to your question, we have all seen significant changes in the way traditional retailing has been done in this country. And as a result of the internet, a lot of businesses have gone by the wayside as a result of that. Our efforts have been in trying to rent our retail component of this project focused heavily on renting to stores that we feel will stand the test of time, notwithstanding the internet's intervention in the traditional retailing that we've all known. And those categories that we have focused on over these last 3 or 4 years in our leasing efforts have been traditionally related to food, health and fitness, and entertainment. And the vast majority of all of our leasing success has been in those categories. We presently have over 70% of our entire retail component in signed leases. And at this early stage in the development of this process, that's being way ahead of the curve. So we're very excited about all of that. One of the tenants is BJ's Wholesale Club. BJ's has done extremely well, even in this change in the retailing structure of our country. They have had record numbers in recent years. In this particular location, they're not going to have a traditional big box store that you would see out in the suburbs at around 130,000 to 140,000 square feet. This is a 90,000 square foot store. It is their first urban store, and it's on the second floor of the 3-story retail component so that we can rent the smaller stores underneath them to smaller retailers. But their focus is 75% of that store is going to be devoted to food. And they also are going to be selling, yes, large quantities of different goods and services that are traditional, but they're going to also sell the smaller amounts of these different products and services so that people that shop at their store can walk out and carry them home if they walk or if they have to take public transportation. So this is a completely different store than you would traditionally see out in the suburbs because it's being catered to the urban environment. And we think that they will do extremely well here. They're very excited. Their company is very strong. And we feel that with a very strong emphasis on food, that they will be successful. In addition to our focus on food and health and entertainment, down the road, when we start to bring these buildings out of the ground, we're going to kick off our initiative to rent stores, smaller shops and boutiques, to members of the local community, local entrepreneurs, community people that want to start up a new business. And that's an initiative that we are going to undertake, and we're going to support that initiative by providing financial subsidies so that these tenants can get in business and they can stay in business, because on their own it would be very hard to potentially pay the high rents that you need to meet today's ever-increasing construction costs. So we're very excited about that being part of our rental program as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you very much.
Item number 11, request authorization to extend the tentative designation of Jackson Square Partners, LLC, as redeveloper of the development parcels within Roxbury and Jamaica Plain. Dana.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and Secretary Polhemus. This particular designation for Jackson Square Partners relates to the overall multi-phased Jackson Square project, for which the BPDA has been serving as the entity that's looking at the regulatory process in collaboration with our sister agencies at the state, led by DCAM. The development team of Jackson Square Partners has been working very diligently on aspects of the overall designation, and as you are aware, this designation is for a year, as has been agreed to by the memorandum of agreement, with the understanding that the development team would come back to us periodically with updates as far as its progress. And they have been reaching many milestones, none the least of which is the successful procurement of a MassWorks grant through the state to begin and complete by this April aspects of a sewer relocation that will support the future build-out of 250 Center Street and 25 Amory Street, those housing projects. In addition, both projects, particularly under Site 3, which is the next phase of development, have submitted to the city's Department of Neighbor Development, as well as the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, various funding applications. And one set of applications has been approved, and it's anticipated that the next set will be approved so that they can move forward with their various financing considerations. 25 Amory Street is looking to do its financial closing to schedule this summer, and then 250 Center Street will look to schedule very closely thereafter. So staff are confident, given these various milestones, that this development team, working through its funding, working through its various design considerations, and also I should note that we have also been working on the Public Improvements Commission aspect of these projects as well, and that's been going steadily. We're confident that this designation extension is in fact appropriate and appreciate your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Are there
I
any
also want to
questions?
acknowledge, members of the development team, Intia Isaza Figueroa and Noah Sawyer, who are project directors from Jackson Square Partners, who can answer questions if need be.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
Okay, very good. If there's no further questions, Ted has a question.
No.
Oh. If there's no further questions, the motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And there's one abstain.
Thanks very much.
Item number 12, request authorization to issue a certificate of completion to SCD 1350 Boylston Street LLC for the construction of 1350 Boylston Street in the Fenway. Motion's in order.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We're going to skip item number 13 until we get to 5:30 p.m. We're going to go to item number 14, correct? Oh, that's not a hearing?
No.
Oh, it says not open to public. Never mind. We're going to go right to item number 13. I know. Okay. Item 13, request authorization to adopt a demonstration project plan under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 121B, Section 46F, as amended, in connection with the 40 Trinity Place project in the Back Bay, to adopt certain findings related to the demonstration project plan, to adopt an order of taking for certain air rights above Stewart Street and Trinity Place, and to execute a deed conveying said air rights to Trinity Stewart LLC, and to co-petition the Public Improvement Commission to discontinue said air rights and to take all related actions. Aisling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. The 40 Trinity Place project is located at the corner of Stewart Street and Trinity Place and is currently occupied by the Boston Common Hotel and Conference Center. The project was approved by this board on April 14, 2016, and consists of the construction of a new mixed-use building containing approximately 379,565 square feet of new hotel uses for approximately 154 guest rooms, conference and ballroom areas, and a pool and fitness center, along with approximately 146 condominium units, restaurants, lounges, expansion space for the adjacent university club, and related accessory uses. The project requires the discontinuance and transfer of air rights in the public way above portions of Stewart Street and Trinity Place for canopy elements and design improvements, which elements and improvements also provide wind mitigation benefits for pedestrians. Such canopy elements and design improvements further the appropriateness of the project's design for the project site, and were reviewed during the project's design review process and approved pursuant to the design review letter from the BPDA. The project site is currently an aging, underutilized building with minimal pedestrian or street-level enhancements, and the taking area is detrimental to growth, as it is unduly costly to develop soundly on its own, which attracts blight. The acquisition of the taking area by the BPDA and subsequent conveyance to the proponent is necessary to allow construction of the design elements and will make the taking area appropriate for sound development as part of the project, completion of which will greatly improve one of the few remaining blighted parcels in the Back Bay neighborhood. I'll flick through these slides very quickly. This first slide, here's our site plan, some building design elements, the wind canopy, and the discontinuance areas in question. BPDA staff recommends approval of the demonstration project plan, order of taking, and all other votes associated with this board action. I'm joined this evening by members of the development team. We're happy to answer any questions should the board have them.
Okay, thank you, Aisling. Are there any questions from the board?
How does this interface with both the redevelopment of the Back Bay Station and whatever may happen with the parking facility on Stewart Street?
I can speak quickly to the BPDA. Obviously, we'll look at everything wholly. I don't know if the development team has any specific.
We're certainly working with Joe Sheridan here on behalf of the proponent. We're working with the neighbors. It's not a part of the of our development site, but we have been coordinating with them to make sure that you know, the development and everything will be you know, meshed together and you know, work fluidly if and when that development moves forward.
Are there any further questions? Hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Ashton. Item number 14, request authorization to issue a determination waiving the requirement of further review pursuant to Article 80 Section 80A-6.2 of the zoning code, in connection with the notice of project change for the 31 through 61 45 Temple Street project, for the reduction of 70 residential units to 62 residential units, and to take all related actions. Aisling.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon again, Madam Secretary and members of the board. On July 14, 2016, the BPDA board voted to approve the redevelopment of the existing connected Archer and Donahue buildings previously owned by Suffolk University at 33 to 61 Temple Street in Beacon Hill. The proposal called for the conversion of the buildings into a full-service 71-unit condominium building with approximately 5,745 square feet of amenity space for use by the condominium unit owners. Parking for up to 54 vehicles in a below-grade garage and covered storage for up to 75 bicycles were also included in the approval. On November 22, 2017, the BPDA issued a certificate of compliance for the originally approved project, reflecting adjustments to the below-grade parking and unit count. Pursuant to the certificate of compliance, the below-grade parking garage would now accommodate parking for up to 50 vehicles, and 70 residential condominium units would be constructed as opposed to 71 as originally approved. On November 19, 2018, the proponent filed a notice of project change with the BPDA, proposing 2 slight changes to the originally approved and further revised project. The proponent proposed a change to the bicycle storage in the building, which has since been abandoned, and as such, the bicycle storage remains as originally approved. The NPC for vote before the board this evening, as such, is to approve the construction of 62 residential condominium units at 33 to 61 Temple Street, a reduction of 8 units from the revised project as described in the certificate of compliance. The proponent remains committed to community benefit and inclusionary development commitments made at the time of the project's original approval. I'll be happy now to hand it over to Dennis Quilty, Project Counsel, who can give you a brief introduction and we can walk you through a presentation.
Okay, thank you, Aisling.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Executive Secretary. Thank you, Aisling, very much for your assistance on this project. This is a request, as clearly stated, to reduce the number of units from 70 to 62. This results in a combined now the unit count of 14 one-bedroom, 25 two-bedroom, 23 bedroom, and 3 four-bedroom units. The square footage of the project has not changed. Our commitments to the affordable housing, I apologize, and the bicycle storage remain in place. The unit count reduction results primarily from the addition of larger units, which was something that people in the community were interested in for families. We did have a very positive meeting, public meeting in December, which went very well. And again, we're here to answer any questions you might have. Matt Duggan from the architectural team can run you through the slides of the project.
Okay, thank you very much.
So the project location is on Temple Street between Dern Street and Cambridge Street on Beacon Hill. Here is, on the top, is the original unit count, totaling 70, and the proposed reduced unit count is below. All the areas in red are where adjacent units have been combined to reduce the unit count down by 8. The overall square footage of the project is unchanged. All the changes are internal. We've included a couple photos of construction progress. These are recent construction photos. And then here is a rendering of the project when completed. If you have any questions, we have now concluded the slideshow.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
I had some questions about the unit mix when this came before the board before. And I just want clarification on the reason for the reduction in units and the increase in the number of larger unit in the mix of larger units. If I hear you correctly, you're saying that in your conversations with the neighbors, there was more demand stated for 3 and 4 bedroom units on the top of Beacon Hill next to the State House?
Correct. When we're going through the process and meeting with the neighbors in their original Article 80 process, there was always a desire to have more larger family size units. And as the marketing process has gone through, that is also bearing true in the marketplace.
And the community benefits in terms of the numbers, the contributions towards numbers of affordable units will remain the same?
That is correct.
Okay, are there any further questions? Hearing none, a motion's in order. Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 15, request authorization to adopt the First Amendment to the report and decision on the Old Colony Phase 3B, Chapter 121A project that approves the ownership structure through the Boston Housing Authority to include an overarching condominium for the buildings and a long-term lease for the individual units, which will remain affordable rental for 99 years. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Madam Secretary. Ruth Silman from Nixon and Peabody would like to address the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Ruth Silman with Nixon Peabody. I'm project counsel for Old Colony. There are 3 subphases to the third Old Colony phase, what we call Phase 3. We're here tonight on Phases 3A and 3B. And this is a request for a First Amendment to report and decision pursuant to Chapter 121A for each of those projects. There is no change being proposed at all to the number of units, the buildings, the building envelopes, the way that any of this will look. We are simply requesting that a change of ownership, which is really a little bit of a fiction. It's a request to impose a condominium form of ownership, not for individual condominiums. I want to make sure that's very clear. These projects will continue to be rentals and apartments, but because of the financing, which combines 4% and 9% tax credits, in order to impose that financing structure, we need to impose the condominium form of ownership so that we can have condominium units within the buildings that are large, that contain multiple units each. And again, it's simply so that the borrower entities for purposes of the financing can be separated from one another. But that is the only reason that we are doing this. So the board memo goes through, and I'd be happy to tell you which units are in which, how many units there are in each one of the condominium units, but it really is just a mechanism to enable the financing to occur.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Item number 16, request authorization to adopt the First Amendment to the report and decision of the Old Colony Phase 3. Is this the same one, Lance? Yeah. We still have to do a second.
It's exactly the same issue, Mr. Chairman.
Right,
yes.
but we still have to do a vote.
Yes.
You're not
Sorry,
gonna-
we we got ahead of ourselves.
Right, I understand. They were,
yeah,
no, they were leaving. We were staying, they're leaving.
So moved.
I still have to read it. So item number 16, request authorization to adopt the First Amendment to the report and decision of the Old Colony Phase 3, Chapter 121A project that approves the ownership structure through the Boston Housing Authority to include an overarching condominium for the buildings and a long-term lease for the individual units, which will remain affordable for rental units for 99 years. A motion's in order?
So moved.
So
Second.
moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I was going to ask a question.
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Okay, you're good. Thank you. Item number 17, request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80, Section 80E-6 of the zoning code for the construction of 55 residential units, including 7 IDP units, 2,600 square feet of ground floor space, with 2 on-site car share parking spaces located at 21 through 35 West 2nd Street, and to take all related actions. Ashling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon again, Madam Secretary, members of the board. Located at 21 to 35 West 2nd Street and also known as 0 Athens Street, the site of the proposed project is an approximately 10,183 square foot triangular surface parking lot about 300 feet from the MBTA's Broadway station. On October 26, 2018, the BPDA received a small project review application from 0 Athens LLC for the redevelopment of the project site. The proposed project calls for the construction of a new 6-story building totaling approximately 49,928 square feet of gross floor area and containing approximately 55 residential rental units and 2,600 square feet of ground floor retail space. In availing of the project site's proximity to Broadway Station, the proponent has committed to making the project a truly transit-oriented development. And while there is no resident parking associated with the project, there will be 2 building-managed car share vehicles for use by residents. The proponent has also committed to taking the necessary steps to preclude the property from being eligible for resident permit parking in the South Boston neighborhood. The BPDA hosted a public meeting in connection with the submission of a small project view application on November 13th, 2018 in the community room at 50 West Broadway. I'll now hand it over to Joe Hanley, project attorney. Members of the development team are present. We're all happy to answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation, should you have any.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisling. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Attorney Joe Hanley, McDermott, Quilty, and Miller. Here with the development team, Peter Spelios is from Transom Real Estate, Eric Howler and the team from Howler and Yoon as our architects. Want to thank Aisling and senior staff and leadership of the BPDA for helping us work through what we think is a pretty exciting opportunity for a real transit-based development here in the lower end of South Boston. Also, we worked extensively and very well with the West Broadway Neighborhood Association and the St. Vincent Lower End Neighborhood Association residents and local folks who took the time to write in either in support and with concerns. So what you're seeing here, and I'll just take you through the initial site, is the result of not only the input, but really the values of what the community sought for a pretty interesting and challenging site. So the property here is, as you can see, it's sort of a so-called flat iron shape right at the base of Athens, West 2nd, and Dorchester Ave, steps from the Broadway train station. And so what the client, what Transom did was they brought in Howler and Yoon and said, how do we look at this site and address what are some obvious constraints with respect to the shape of it, but also the values of the community, which was we don't necessarily want this ground level filled with an inadequate amount of parking because there's no way that we can really provide anything of any major scale. We prefer to see active community-based retail and some robust open space, which is a challenge for something this small and this constrained. And so that's the direction that we headed in. And the result was started with a much larger and higher project and ended in the mid-range that you'll see. And we began to address parking issues with, I think, the first of its kind in South Boston for a vehicle share program that is only for the residents of the building, and that it also worked for this location, which doesn't have vehicle share for the public available within the train station. The other piece was we worked a lot with the elected officials on what can we do around the site to create off-street parking for residents of South Boston, and how can we also restrict our own tenants at this development from utilizing South Boston stickers, not just through the city, but as this is a lease building, through our leases. And those are some of the things that that we have committed to and that we're pretty excited about. And final thing I would say is you'll see the program here. It's one thing to say we're next to a train station with these programs and the type of housing. These are fairly efficient in size. They are very much directed towards the surrounding community and its public amenities as its amenity rather than larger size ownership, which might require a little more parking. So with that, I'll ask Eric Howler to take you quickly through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Hi, thanks, Joe. Thanks. Just going to show you the project. It's an atypical site, a little bit hard to lay out efficiently. First thing we did is we sort of located a pocket park at the tip. That's a space on the site where the two roads converge. There aren't that many parks in the neighborhood, so that was a nice gesture to do almost 1,000 square feet of park. And then we sort of serrated the edge to create a kind of wider sidewalk along 2nd Street. The sidewalk's about 5 feet wide, so making it sort of open and close provides or gives back a kind of public realm that's appreciable, I think, at grade. Looking at the context, there's all kinds of different styles, all kinds of different heights. There's nothing consistent about that neighborhood. We sort of looked at the different materials that were available, sort of some of the historic materials, some of the new materials. We tried to locate ourselves right in the middle with the material palette. We're looking at a terracotta shingle, something that's quite innovative, brings a lot of warmth to the project. This is a Precedent project with the terracotta shingle. So it catches light in a really beautiful way. It gives a lot of depth and richness to the project. Our proposal has the serrated step in plan, but also steps slightly in section. We see the landscaping elements in the pockets that we're creating within the serrations. A view from the prow of this building. You see the rental units sort of facing the pocket park. There's retail at the base, and so you could imagine a cafe that opens out to this park, activating that corner where these two streets come together in a way that kind of the beginning of this neighborhood. A view of the park and some of the plantings. You see some of the texture of the terracotta shingle. And then the view looking back the other way. There's some adjacent buildings. This is not the tallest building in the neighborhood. It's actually sort of a little bit lower than some of the surrounding context. This is another view from the prow again. And that's sort of what we've got to share today.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes your presentation?
It does. Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any questions from the board?
I just have a comment, and I want to commend the development team for including an architect who is among the more innovative architects in the city. And what you're presenting, I think, represents that.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions on a motion as an order?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 18, request authorization to execute an off-site housing creation agreement for Seaport Square Block M project for 3 units to be located at 9 through 16 Woodward Street. Tim.
Chairman Burke, members of the board, and Secretary Polimas. I'm here today for the approval of the location and off-site housing creation agreement for Seaport Square Block M to create 3 inclusionary development policy units at 9 to 16 Woodward Street in South Boston. On May 12, 2016, the board voted to approve Seaport Square Block M's development plan, which is now under construction and being marketed as Echelon. The project would meet its IDP obligation through the following: 28 on-site IDP units, a $3.2 million contribution to the IDP fund, and approximately 62 units off-site within the Seaport or South Boston. The board has previously approved 2 off-site locations: 206 West Broadway with the South Boston NDC, which is building 16 units and are currently under construction, and 9th and Mercer with Beacon Communities, which is 55 elderly units, which we anticipate will start construction as soon as they receive their 4% tax credits. For these 2 projects, Block M has received credit for 59 of the 62 units created. The proponent is working with South Boston NDC again to site the final 3 units at 9 to 16 Woodward Street, adjacent to the Andrews Square T-stop. This is a unique opportunity for South Boston NDC to purchase 15 existing units and income restrict them. 3 will be funded by Block M, and the remainder will be funded through Department of Neighborhood Development's Acquisition Opportunity Program. Approval of this location will fulfill Block M's off-site requirements and will result in a total of 74 units, more than the 62 initially contemplated. Rebecca Matson from Cottonwood, who represents Echelon, and Donna Brown from South Boston NDC are here if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 19. Request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80, Section 80E-6 of the zoning code for the construction of Phase 1, which will consist of 42 low-income elderly units, 3,798 square feet of office space with 5 parking spaces, and the renovation of Phase 2 consisting of 17 income-restricted units, and 3,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space located at 187 Sumner Street, and to recommend the approval to the Board of Appeal for the necessary zoning relief and to take all related actions. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Michael Sinatra, BPDA Project Manager. The project before you is 187 Sumner Street in East Boston, which is situated directly across the street from the Maverick Station Blue Line T-stop. This site was originally part of a 121A that expired this past October. The proponent, the East Boston Community Development Corporation, currently owns an existing mixed-use commercial 17-unit low-income elderly housing on the front of the site. This building is currently ill-equipped to house its current residents, so the proposal before you encompasses the construction of a new 42-unit, 7-story building behind the existing building, which will be made up of 100% low-income senior housing. The building will also include 5 parking spaces, one of which will be handicap accessible. Upon completion of construction, the existing 17-unit building will then be rehabilitated and converted over to workforce housing, and the existing tenants will be allowed to move into the new building if they so choose. Due to the low-income nature of these buildings, they are both exempt from the IDP policy. The proponent filed their small project review application on September 28, 2018. A public meeting was held on October 24, 2018. This meeting was lightly attended, and the project has received support from the community, including the elected officials. The comment period closed on October 29, 2018. At this time, I will turn it over to the development team to go into more detail, after which we would be happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, Attorney Matthew Eckel with Drago and Toscano. With me tonight is Al Caldarelli from the East Boston CDC and Diane Dooley, the project architect. As mentioned, this is Grace Apartments is the name of this proposed building at 187 Sumner Street. This project is really a 2-phase project. As was mentioned, we will be creating 42 affordable senior units, creating 96 construction jobs with a $12 million investment. And it's a transit-oriented development based upon its close proximity to Maverick Square MBTA station. The first phase, phase 1, is to erect a 7-story residential building with 42 affordable senior housing units and 5 parking spaces. As Michael mentioned, phase 2 would be to renovate the existing Woodbury building, which currently has 17 affordable units and commercial space. The existing tenants at the building, at the Woodbury building, would be offered a right of first refusal to take one of the new units at the proposed building at 187 Sumner. And once that renovation was completed at the Woodbury building, it would become workforce housing. The zoning district is waterfront residential, therefore this use is allowed. The proposed gross square footage of the new building is 38,250 square feet, and the proposed building height is 7 stories at 70 feet. You see before you is the project location. The yellow L shape, which wraps around a building, has frontage on Sumner Street. The building that it wraps behind is that existing Woodbury building, so it would be semi-attached there in the middle with a driveway to access the 5 parking spaces. The floor plan would be 6 floors of residential housing with 7 units per floor. There'd be 1 2-bedroom unit per floor and 6 1-bedroom units per floor. This is the existing conditions. As you can see, it's basically a parking lot on the right. The building to your left there is the Woodbury building. And this is the ground floor plan. At this point, I'll turn it over to Diane Dooley. She can walk through the floor plan a little more detailed and talk a little bit about the design of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. The building is, as was just mentioned, is located with an entry off of Sumner Street and adjacent, directly abutting the Woodbury building on the upper levels. Between the 2 buildings on the first level is a drive that enters the back of the site in where the parking is located underneath the building. The front entry from a pedestrian access is through the sidewalk off of Sumner Street into an entry lobby. An additional space on the first floor is dedicated to service and mechanical space. The elevations have been developed with the assistance of the BPDA comments. The building is a 7-story building. The materials are anticipated to be brick and metal panel, with the first level being the metal panel and brick above. There has been studies done. These are, okay. In elevation and perspective, having to do with the different materials. The BPDA review process, design review process, requested that different materials were considered and thought through during the design phase. Scheme 1, which is what you are looking at right now, is the perspective from Maverick Station, and what you see is the first floor as metal panel, the levels 2 through 6 in brick, and then the metal panel at the top level. The back of the building is all brick. The second, this is not. Oh, they took it out. Okay, I'm sorry. I guess it's been taken out. The second scheme reduced the amount of brick on the back portion of the building and considers metal siding for more of the building facade. And is that it? Okay.
That concludes our presentation.
Okay,
We'd be happy
good.
to take any questions from the board at this point.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Current residents will continue to live there while the construction is going on?
Yes, they will. When we did this building 45 years ago, there were a lot different zoning and code requirements. And this was the first building I ever did with the CDC 45 years ago. And what happened was that as we went into the building, the Section 8 that we got from HUD and from MHFA was for handicapped and elderly. And yet each of the handicapped lived on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. On the 3rd floor, all their bedrooms were on the 4th floor. And what we found is that none of them were using their bedrooms. They had cots in their living rooms because they just couldn't make another flight of stairs. So the question became, we don't want to lose 17 Section 8 units in East Boston, so where can we put them? So the plan is for those folks to live in that apartment until the new building is done. They move into the new building when it's done. What we did is we entered into an agreement with the city that the old existing building would be sold into the AOP program. So in perpetuity, it would remain at 100% mean income for 60% of the unit and 60% of mean income for 40% of the unit. The CDC's goal is affordable housing in East Boston. That's all we do. So that's why we thought this was a good project for us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board?
Can you talk about what's happening with the commercial tenants? Is there a commercial tenant here?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Can you talk about what's happening with the commercial tenants? Are there any
Okay,
commercial tenants?
The bulk of the commercial tenants is occupied by Metro Management, which is a wholly owned division of the East Boston CDC. What we're exploring is placing them in another one of our buildings, but because of all the extensive activity that's going on in Maverick Square, the new buildings, the new tenants, we are going to explore trying to find another a tenant to go into the building. So we're not displacing any of the tenants that are there who other than our own division.
Okay. There is some sushi restaurant, or is there a restaurant?
Yeah, we've looked at a couple of things, coffee shop, a restaurant. Oh, the existing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, is there something happening with a sushi restaurant that has put money into?
We're waiting for him to open up.
Oh.
We've been dealing with him for a long time.
Okay.
We've helped him in every way we can in terms of reducing rent and the like. He's having some problems, money-wise. I don't know how quickly he'll open.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But we want him to open, and we'll help him open.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further questions and a motion is in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Congratulations.
Nice project.
Item number 20, request authorization to issue a scoping determination waiving further review pursuant to Article 80, Section 80B-5.3D of the zoning code for the construction of two sites at 60 Kilmarnock Street East site consisting of 366 units with 192 on-site parking spaces and retail space, and the west site consisting of 77 units and 58 on-site parking spaces, including 37 on-site IDP units, and to take all related actions. Tim.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. The project site is located on several parcels in the Fenway neighborhood, totaling approximately 2.16 acres. The first group of contiguous parcels, the east site, comprises 60 Kilmarnock Street, 70 to 80 Kilmarnock Street, and 59 to 75 Queensberry Street. The second group of contiguous parcels, the west site, comprises 67 to 75 Kilmarnock Street. The proponent proposes a redevelopment that comprises approximately 426,500 square feet of residential development, totaling approximately 443 units, 1,100 square feet of meeting and office space, and 2,100 square feet of retail space. The east building will have underground parking with approximately 165 spaces. The west building will have underground parking with approximately 58 spaces. Parking and loading will be accessed from private alleys. The proponent filed a project notification form for the proposed project on July 9th, 2018. A scoping session was held at BPDA offices on July 23rd, 2018. Public meetings were held on August 8th, 2018, September 5th, 2018, and November 7th, 2018. Impact Advisory Group meetings were held on July 24th, 2018, August 28th, 2018, November 8th, 2018, and January 10th, 2019. The proposed project received approval from the Boston Civic Design Commission on January 8th, 2019. The proposed project provides a number of public benefits. Prior to filing the PNF, the proponent made a $6 million contribution toward preserving affordable housing at the Newcastle Saranac Apartments, an expiring use project in the South End. This contribution has helped keep 97 low and moderate income families in their homes. The proponent received credit for 28 IDP units and will build an additional 37 units on site. The project site is also home to the K Street Clubhouse, a meeting place for people in recovery that focuses on the LGBTQ communities. K Street has been in operation for more than 30 years and is a vital part of the neighborhood. The proponent is committed to accommodating K Street on an at-will basis until construction commences, to providing K Street with a temporary space during the construction period so that its operations can continue uninterrupted, and to provide K Street with an 1,100 square foot space on a long-term lease in the new project. In addition, the proponent is committed to a $100,000 contribution to Rambler Park in the Fenway, $20,000 to Operation Peace, a neighborhood nonprofit serving youth and seniors, and $10,000 to the Fenway Community Center. Additional mitigation and benefits can be found in your board memo. BPDA staff believes that the proposed project will be a positive addition to the Fenway neighborhood and is recommending approval. I'll now ask Jay Doherty from the development team to introduce his team and present the project, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. I'm accompanied tonight by the project team, including John Sullivan, Jacob Vance, and Michelle Blue, and our architectural team from CBT, headed by Phil Casey. Before I ask Phil to review the project, I wanted to emphasize 3 or 4 points. This is the former Boston Cab site. And the Boston Cab site, as you can see, it's a large site. It's over 2 acres. And it is spread across 3 parts of land in the neighborhood. It's in the neighborhood. And as a large site, it was the 24/7 operation of Boston Cab for several hundred taxis. And as well had tenancies from rock clubs and sports bars. So its passing is not necessarily mourned by the neighborhood. And there's been a lot of dialogue with the neighborhood as to how to replace this land use with other things. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we're partnered with CIM, which has other projects underway in Boston, and it is something that we were very happy to, with CIM, be able to make a contribution of $6 million to the Newcastle Saranac project so that it avoided slipping from the 97 families in that project, that the Fenway CDC and its partners, together with our $6 million capitalization, were able to recapitalize and are now on the way towards renovating and restoring and maintaining in permanent affordability. And that was done before we even filed the project, and I'm very proud to be associated with CIM on that basis. This was a very difficult acquisition, made probably a little bit more difficult by the fact that its seller was a convicted federal felon in jail, and also financially fragile because of the decline in value of taxi cab medallions. Then I just want to quickly mention that it's really been wonderful that we've been able to partner with K Street. K Street has a unique history. It came about at a time when being an LGBTQ support group 30 years ago was not a place that was willingly invited into other venues. And what the Boston Cab principal did, in fact, invite them. They stayed, and they're going to stay permanently in the project. And Jacob and Michelle have worked very closely with them to assure they will have continuing occupancy. The last thing I want to mention, and Phil will touch upon it, is we're going to try something. It may be a little unique. The project is bisected by a private alley. We own a good portion of the alley on both sides, and we share ownership for the entire lane. So we're going to redevelop that alley into a place that has entries, that has curbs, and that has ability and terraces. And we are including many elements to try and make that alley safe, accessible, pleasant, and visible. And you'll see how we came at some of that in these strategies. We had a lot of coaching from the neighborhood in that, because the neighborhood is not without some difficulties in maintaining security. But go ahead, Phil.
Thanks, Jay. So we'll start with this aerial of the neighborhood just to orient everybody to the site here. So you can see the high spine of the Boylston corridor running east-west, and really our site here at the intersection of Kilmarnock and Queensbury in a very different part of the neighborhood. A smaller scale, sort of the West Fenway as it's referred to. And then as we zoom into the site here, you can see it's actually divided into two parcels. Here's the intersection, with the dot, Queensbury Street and Kilmarnock. The eastern parcel here, about 74,000 square feet, has almost 400 feet of frontage on Queensbury, and as Jay mentioned, unique in the sense that it spans over the private alley to a piece that actually faces Peterborough Street. The western site as well, a smaller site on the western side, and a bit less frontage, about 100 feet on Queensbury Street. And then some existing photos of the existing site. At the top level, you see really Kilmarnock Street gives you a sense of the scale and character, kind of a mix of retail and residential, really the primary corridor from Boylston as you enter the site. And then Queensbury Street, a much different residential feel, almost exclusively residential, and really kind of based around this typology of these sort of cloistered courtyards that have a very kind of quiet residential feel, and that's something that we heard strongly from the public, that character they wanted to preserve. And then a few existing photographs of the site itself, a little bit of a blighted site today, obviously the parking lot for the taxi cabs, the existing storage buildings for the taxi cab, etc., the western site on the other side of Kilmarnock. And here's a view down that private alley as it currently stands right now before the project goes ahead. And then just a little bit about some of the design precedents. This is a site analysis we did, and as we started to look through this portion of Fenway, we came across this really sort of beautiful network of open green spaces that are really intertwined in the neighborhood. And whether they come in this sort of building courtyard format or these pocket parks like Rambler Park, you know, the idea of embedding this project into the neighborhood and contextualizing into the fabric, we took these cues and really started to look at that in the design of the project. So the project as it's proposed today, again, the two sites, Queensbury Street and Kilmarnock. The eastern parcel here, we're talking divided really into two buildings. It's an 8-story building potentially condo ownership on the eastern portion, and then that middle portion being rental. You can see the massing is really organized around that courtyard typology, really sculpting that bar along Queensbury Street and keeping it with the street rhythm. And as it turns the corner, another sort of courtyard that starts to talk about this, this really new precedent in the alley that we want to talk to you guys about. And then the western site itself, 77,000 square feet here, and 77 residential units in that site itself. The ground plane, a little bit about the public realm. Again, you can see the sort of courtyard typology on Queensbury Street being reflected. The idea that these can have some very different characters depending on the type of residential that's off of it. The private alley that we mentioned here. And then a more urban plaza off Kilmarnock, again, a very different character with the building spanning above that. You can see in the ground plane, we've got a lot of residential units facing Queensbury, and then mixed in with some residential amenity spaces. And then you'll also notice residential units on the alley side. The idea that we can activate that alley with residential entries, terraces and whatnot, eyes on the street. The idea that that alley and the proportion of that alley has a really nice streetscape to it. So the idea of creating something very different in that mid-block private alley. And then spanning across, and then on the other side of the parcel facing Kilmarnock, we have a bit of retail that continues the retail from Peterborough Street around the corner. We've really sort of downsized that after some of the community feedback. Also a residential lobby and some residential amenity space ringing that courtyard. The idea of activating that space, maybe it's drop off for Ubers and whatnot and people to take advantage of. And then on the western site, you can see, again, residential units lining Queensbury Street, taking that sort of neighborhood typology, as well as a corner residential lobby on the street front. You can see services off of the private alley, as well as the parking entries to below grade parking from there. Here's a section of the project. The upper section is of the western parcel, 8 stories high, really sort of in keeping with some of the higher Kilmarnock projects. It's stacked residential use over a single story and a half of parking below grade. And as you can see, the massing steps back, you'll see in some of our renderings, to sort of mitigate some of the visual impact of the massing. And then the lower section talks about the western parcel, which again spans over that alley. And you can see starts to kind of mitigate between the, if you can see in the western half, this picks up the height of Boylston, about 200 feet, all the way down to sort of the Kilmarnock scale, 7 to 8 stories. So really kind of, yeah. And then we'll go to the building elevations. You'll see it a little better in the renderings, but these are building elevations. The materiality taking its cues from the neighborhood, mostly masonry with some metal panel penthouses, the idea of punch windows, vertical balconies, and bays that pick up on a lot of the language and the rhythm of the neighborhood. So here's the first rendering of the project. This is looking east down Queensbury at the eastern parcel. You can start to see the carving out of the courtyard typology, the rhythm of the streetscape and the massing. The idea of this stepped back massing at the upper levels, this steps away from the streetscape and the pedestrian sight lines. And then you can start to see the materiality a little bit better here, using this brick vocabulary, punched windows, vertical bay elements, again taking its cues from the neighborhood, as well as balcony elements. Here's a close-up of one of the entry courtyards on Queensbury Street. This contemporary interpretation of what the neighborhood already has, the idea of an axial main entry to the building there, activating that space, and the idea that the space could feel comfortable for both residents as well as the public that might be coming by in the streetscape. You get a little better sense of the masonry detailing we're picking up, some of the articulation that we see in the neighborhood as well. And then another streetscape view. This is west, looking back down Queensbury. You start to see how it integrates with the materiality, again, the brick punches of the buildings across the street. The courtyards have this relationship across the street to each other. And then the continuation of the streetscape and the landscape, creating this sort of double-loaded landscape piece, and how those courtyards interact and face the street there. A little bit about the landscape design as we kind of conceptualize this. Again, the idea that this is not necessarily a private courtyard, but a public one, and a number of ways to accommodate different folks. And then as we turn the corner on Kilmarnock, a rendering of the Kilmarnock Plaza we talked about would still allow vehicular access, but the idea that it's really pedestrian prioritized, ringed on either side with residential amenity and retail, and spanning across with residential units at the top. And then again, the alley that we talked about, the idea that this is really not a backside, but again, a front facade, keeping this bay architectural rhythm, the idea that residential unit entries front on this alley side, as well as terraces that start to activate that and bring life to the alley itself. This is a view of Peterborough in the foreground, looking down Kilmarnock. And really your prime entry as you come down Peterborough. This facade starts to take its cues a little bit from the cornice lines and the verticality of the masonry, stepping the upper floor back from a sightline perspective in the punched windows, but in a little bit more of a contemporary architectural language. And then finally, the western parcel itself. This parcel really sort of integrating the scale of Queensbury Street. You can see here, the scale of Kilmarnock with the scale of Queensbury Street here. With this corner element, and then sort of the bay elements keeping Queensbury Street moving along, and then the step back of the upper levels at the penthouse. And then just finally a view looking down Queensbury Street of both the western parcel and the eastern parcel as it kind of participates in the context of the neighborhood. And then I believe we have a slide on community benefits. I don't know if anyone from CCF wants to speak to these.
Jacob Vance is the Senior Project Manager, and Jacob's going to review these for you.
Hello. So the first one is one that we've talked about, which is the $6 million towards the Newcastle Saranac project. The remainder of the IDP units are on site, so at the current unit count, that's 37 units. 3 of which will be home ownership units, and the rest would be into the rental portion. And then Jay talked about the K Street maintaining a permanent location on our project, as well as setting up an interim operation space for them during our construction period. You just saw some renderings about the streetscapes, really improving the sidewalk, widening the sidewalk, putting street trees, all in the context of the West Fens neighborhood. The Rambler Park contribution, Tim had talked about this at the beginning. That's $100,000, $20,000 towards Operation Peace, and $10,000 towards the community center, as well as a bunch of new construction and some permanent retail jobs as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Good, okay. Are there any questions from the board?
It's my understanding that there's a restaurant currently at this location that still has a significant time left on its lease. As a restaurant owner myself, which could be called a nightclub as well, I have a restaurant and bar with entertainment. I do sympathize with restaurant owners and wonder what is the future of that restaurant there.
Well, first of all, they have a lease, and we will honor the lease. I think ultimately, and we've had some discussions, I think ultimately, I think they prefer to wind up operations gradually. And we've discussed that, and I think we're going to have to provide some financial benefits to that. As you probably know, it's a very large restaurant. It's 6,000 square feet. It's 2 divorced components, so it's very, very hard as it is. And the notion of having significant construction coming forward for the next couple of years. So we've been discussing with them, and I think we will continue to discuss and then ultimately conclude some kind of buyout of that lease. But otherwise, we'll honor the lease, and that phase of the project would be delayed.
Okay,
Great, well, I hope you can do the right thing in terms of either honoring them or buying them out. Just
certainly
making a plug for that.
Are there any further questions from the board?
This affordable housing agreement is kind of complicated. I was hoping Tim Davis could go over it for us.
So as you've seen a couple of times, that we approved in June of 2018 a $6 million payment from this development team to the Newcastle Saranac project, about a mile from this project. Newcastle Saranac is a 97-unit affordable project that its affordability expired in March of 2018. While funding was lined up from the CDAC, which is the Community Economic Development Assistance Corporation, a quasi-state agency, to purchase the buildings initially and have a holding period before they gathered other financial resources to move forward. They did need additional equity in the deal, and this $6 million was really that answer to that. That building, they closed on the sale of the property last Friday, or the 4th, so 2 weeks ago. And so now we're in the position where we are looking to basically sell the other units as off-site units. to preserve the entire project. I am pleased to say that we think we have a solution that we will be bringing to the board next month, which would involve off-site units from 2 other area developers who are ready to pull their building permits. So they would be fulfilling off-site obligations in the traditional manner, in that they're approved by this board to do so and approved to do it at this location, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking forward to hopefully resolving the rest of the financial needs of the project through board actions next month, and then they would be able to do their second closing within a year, where they would be able to do the renovations of the project and secure them permanently. So regardless, this $6 million means that there's 21 units there that will have income restriction no matter what happens, just because of this $6 million.
Okay, thank you.
And the remaining IDP obligation is on site, so 37 units on site.
So I do have one question. So some of the units are going to be for sale, condos for sale, and some of them are going to be rental, but are they in separate buildings? Are they on the east, or are they on the west, or how's that going to work?
Right now, as proposed, the eastern building is actually divided into a for sale, if you can imagine, and a rental component. So one courtyard organizes the for sale component, one courtyard organizes the rental component, and then right now the western parcel is considered for sale right now at this time.
And there's underground parking for all the units?
Correct. Underground parking on both parcels, actually, for the full extent of the parcel.
Okay, then any other questions from the board? All right, hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, thank you, congratulations.
Thank you.
Item number 21. Requests authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80, Section 8E, 6 of the zoning code for the construction of 27 residential units, including 4 IDP units, 29 on-site parking spaces, and bicycle storage located at 775 Morton Street, and to take all related actions. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. The proposed project includes 27 rental units with off-street parking for 29 vehicles with approximately 1,500 square feet for ground floor retail. The unit mix includes 3 one-bedrooms and 24 two-bedrooms. Staff is requesting authorization to issue a certification of approval. The project's architect, Mark Joyce, will give you a brief overview, and representatives from the development team are here to answer any questions for the board members.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Mark Joyce, as stated. I'm from Phase Zero Design, with the architect on the project. As stated, it's a total of 27 units, 3 floors of residential sitting on top of primarily parking, structured parking, but with the additional benefit of 1,500 square feet of either retail or commercial space. That tenant is to be determined, but the emphasis would be on neighborhood-related type of retail or commercial space. On each floor of the residential space, we have 8 two-bedroom units, which are roughly 823 square feet. One one-bedroom unit, which is roughly 723 square feet. Materially, the exterior building, after I think it was 4 meetings with the BPDA design review, we're at this facade design. We've popped the facade with some traditional bay windows. When I say that, we have not only windows on the front of the window bay, but we turn the corner with a smaller window. We greet the street with the retail space, as stated. Material palette on the ground level will be a brick veneer. We're looking at a black brick veneer, and as we travel up through the building, we're looking at a traditional clapboard siding, and then a PVC or a composite panel in a board and batten pattern. To look at the site plan, Like I say, it's primarily ground level structured parking contained within the building. We do have 6 spaces towards the back of the building. We do have a service court off to the right, off of Morton Street, which will be primarily for dumpster access, residential trash removal. We also do have some bike storage in that area. Again, 1,500 square feet of retail or commercial space. The entry into the project for parking is off the Wildwood Street. We did not feel that coming in off of Morton Street was a very good idea. And talking with the community, Wildwood was the preferred access in and out of the building. Just to kind of give you a sense of the property, the top view, it's presently a blighted site. Whatever was there has been torn down. There's a construction fence around the perimeter. You can see that aerial view, also, the view from Wildwood Street and Morton Street, kind of give you the context of the neighborhood area. Our abutters on the Morton Street side are a single story, I believe it's a laundromat, am I right? It's a mixture of retail spaces on the Wildwood Street side, we're traditional triple deckers. Just show you a couple other views. On the right-hand side is, again, Morton Street. On the left-hand side is Wildwood. And I'll open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
very much.
Congratulations. Item number 22. Request authorization to enter into an amendment to the land disposition agreement, loan documents, and all other necessary documents in connection with the transfer and financial restructuring of the St. Botolph Assisted Living Community project on Parcel 6. Tim.
Chairman Burke, members of the board, and Secretary Polimas, I'm here today concerning a financial restructuring and partner change at the St. Botolph Assisted Living Project, also known as the Susan Bayless. The project is an 82-unit mixed-income assisted living development built on a BRA urban renewal parcel and was completed in 2003. Currently, we have 2 loans on the project, a $1,137,500 loan from funds that were from the IDP fund from the time when the BRA held those funds, and a $350,000 acquisition loan. The loans are currently due in 2020. The interest of IMHIC is being transferred to Hall Keene, the current manager of the property, and to enhance the feasibility of the project, Hall Keene is seeking to extend the maturity to 2057. As D&D also has a loan on this project, D&D and BPDA staff have worked together to get to this solution, has agreed to similar changes in terms to their loan as well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none.
Tim,
ahead.
are we forgiving the one loan, or they're wrapping into one loan and all getting extended together?
We're just extending the maturity on both loans.
Okay.
We're not wrapping them in together.
Are there any lessons learned from this situation? I guess was my question.
The Susan Bayless has had ongoing financial feasibility issues vis-a-vis, it's a mixed income project that has had ongoing difficulties in terms of continually marketing the market rate units in the project, and they're continuing to look at ways to restructure. They may have to come back to us again at some point as part of this ongoing restructuring, but this is what we feel that both D&D and BPDA working together, Bob Luisi helped me as well on this, to look at their project finances and say that we don't think that we need to forgive the loan at this point, but that just extending the maturity will assist the project in moving forward.
Do you think this financial situation is the result is specific to this project, or more, because we're seeing more mixed income projects like this where there are market rate units that are supposed to be subsidizing affordable units in one development? Is this a structural thing, or is this just specific to this management team, I guess is my question.
I think there were some initial cost issues when it was first constructed, which contributed to this. I think that it has been difficult to continually lease market rate units in a project where people are really living more close together, and you have some very low-income households as well, including some continual units that are people who were formerly homeless. So I think there has been some tension between the market rate and the low-income units. But we try, and D&D is committed to trying to make sure that this building succeeds and continues as a mixed income project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Tim. Item number 23, request authorization to issue a certificate of completion to the Robert P. Bozakian for the improvements on parcel P-15-2C2 located at 6 Bunker Hill Industrial Park. Christopher.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. My name is Christopher Breen, the Special Project Manager on this. Before you is a recommendation for approval allowing the director to issue a certificate of completion for improvements on parcel P-15-2C2 located at 6 Bunker Hill Industrial Park in the Charlestown Urban Renewal Area, project number R55. This certificate would be contingent upon the successful issuance of a certificate of occupancy by the Inspectional Services Department from the City of Boston, in which they are currently engaged with. BPDA staff did a site visit and found the improvements to meet the requirements of the LDA and plans and to be overall satisfactory. May I answer any questions?
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 24, request authorization to petition the Public Improvement Commission for the discontinuance of a portion of Broadway and a portion of Marginal Road to adopt an order of taking for said portions within parcel R-3A-2, enter into an easement with the Boston Water and Sewer Commission for a portion of Marginal Road, to accept a deed from the City of Boston transferring title of a portion of the former Broadway, to accept a release from the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority for any easements and rights within parcel R-3A2. Janet.
Chairman Burke, members of the board, Secretary Polhemus. The actions before you today are the first steps in correcting the title for parcel R3A2, as you can see on the screen, which is bounded by Pine Street, a parcel owned by the Boston Chinese Evangelical Church, Marginal Road, and Washington. And you can see it's got two ownerships. It's comprised of BRA-owned property and city-owned property. The top part is BRA-owned, and it is comprised of 10 parcels. And the bottom one is the part I'm going to talk about first. This portion of the site is comprised, and I'll show you in a second. This portion is comprised of a portion of Broadway and Marginal Road that are within parcel R3A2, which will be acquired by the BRA by the adoption of an order taking and discontinued by the City of Boston Public Improvement Commission. We are taking this as a triangle, but this is what it actually, oops, these are out of order. These are out of order. Hold on a second. I think they're out of order. Sorry, they're out of order. Anyway, what's happened is on this triangle, there's a little piece that's the curve up in the top right, and that's Broadway, and the rest of it is Marginal Road. Okay. Let's see, within Marginal Road, you'll see this on the next one. You see that little part at the bottom is a 24-inch sewer line and manhole that requires the execution of an easement with the Boston Water and Sewer Commission because it's not being removed at this time. Prior to, we have to enter into that prior to the discontinuance. The middle piece, which, do you know how many slides we have? These slides aren't showing up right, sorry. No, but they're all the same, it looks like. The middle piece is the piece that's former Broadway. It was discontinued in 1976. It's presently owned by the City of Boston, and they voted at PFC yesterday to give us a deed, which we have to accept. So the authorization is for the acceptance of that. Also within the bottom part, the Marginal Road piece, is an old easement that was given to the Metropolitan Transit Authority when this parcel was laid out as Marginal Road by the turnpike, when they put the turnpike through. And they laid it out for the overhead structure, which is no longer there. We have to get a release now from the MBTA for any rights they may have in this parcel because the overhead used to go right over R3A2. So today, to recap, what we're asking for is to petition PIC for the discontinuance of Broadway and the part of Marginal Road that's in R3A2, and order taking for the underlying fee to those portions, authorization for Boston Water and Sewer easement, acceptance of a deed from the city for the former Broadway, and accept a release of any easements and rights that the MBTA may have in the parcel. In the future, further actions by this board will be necessary to complete the consolidation of this parcel, such as a confirmatory order taking, and we'll be back at a later date for that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
It's good to see you back, Janet.
Thank you. Not for long.
That was one good question.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, are there any questions? No? So hearing no questions, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Item number 25, request authorization to disperse $100,000 from the Harvard-Alston Partnership Fund for 16 nonprofit community organizations. Gerald.
Good afternoon again. This is an annual grant, as I think you know. It's been very popular and successful in the Alston community, supporting a lot of good work by a range of nonprofits, and I ask that once again you authorize disbursement of the grants.
Thank you, Gerald. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it.
Thank you.
Item number 26, thank you. Item number 26 is personnel. Jeanette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Madam Secretary. We have a few items for your consideration on the BRA agenda. We have 3 appointments for your consideration with details in the board memos. Kenya Beeman, Community Engagement Manager in the Planning Division, Downtown and Neighborhood Planning Department, with a start date of January 28th. Laura Melly, Deputy Director, Real Estate Procurement and Vendor Management in the Real Estate Division, with a start date of January 28th. Stephen Harvey, Project Manager in the Development Review Division, with a start date of February 4th. We have 1 travel item for your consideration with details listed in the board memo. For out-of-state travel and expenses incurred by Alvaro Lima, Director of Research, and other city officials. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 27, contractual. We need a motion to pay the outstanding bills.
I move we pay our outstanding bills.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. And I need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.